Natkalam, an organization who hires displaced persons as tutors and translators, will be delivering the interpretation services today. Before we begin, I would like to share some housekeeping rules for the event. The first being to ensure that your microphones are muted when the presentation is being delivered, and to use headsets during the meeting when delivering interventions to ensure good quality of sound for the interpreters, and to make sure that you speak at a slower pace, do not interrupt, and allow the pauses. The session today will be recorded and shared with other network members. If during the event you have any technical difficulties or would like to flag any issues, please feel free to send the Secretariat team a message directly. In a moment, a language poll will go live. We would be incredibly grateful if you could identify your preferred working language for when we go into the breakout rooms. Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to the Senior Advisor at the Civil Society Network Secretariat, Barbara, who will be delivering this session today.
Thank you, Nazgul, and thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm very glad to be here with you. So my name is Barbara Rabinder. I'm a senior advisor at the CSN Civil Society Network. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background about myself before I actually start with the presentation. So, and while you are filling the poll for the language preferences. So I have been working with the CSN movement for the past 4 years, including the last 6 months at the Civil Society Network Secretariat, but before that with the CSN Secretariat based in Geneva. And one of the first assignments I worked on was to study the links between nutrition, food systems, and climate change at the Secretariat. And so gradually I became the CSN movement focal point for food systems, for the Food Systems Summit, and I followed very closely all the processes leading up to the summit last year. And so, although I'm not an expert on food systems, technically speaking, I've acquired some expertise, and I hope to be able to present you with a broad vision of food systems and what are the dysfunctions of our current global food systems, and what are ways to transform it, and what can you do about it. So let's go. I think I hope people have filled the poll now. Let me put it on this. All right. So the training will be divided in 3 parts. In the first part, which is a little bit of an introduction, we will be speaking about, you know, what are food systems in general terms and why is it important for nutrition. And then after each part, we will be going into breakout groups to have a little bit of a discussion. So the training is interactive. And the part 2 will be discussing the food systems transformation. Why do we need that? So we'll be looking at all the dysfunctions that there are in the current global food systems. And we'll be looking more closely at the interlinkages between food systems, nutrition, and climate change. And in the last part, we'll be looking at what a food systems approach mean in terms of policy making and implementation, and what can you do about it. And if that's okay with you, we will keep the questions and answers until the end of the presentation. So we have time to go through all the content, and you can then ask questions on everything at the end. Although if you have burning questions, please use the chat and we'll do our best to enter them. All right, so let's go for part 1. What are food systems and how does nutrition fit in them? So, as you know, access to nutrition is more than food. Of course, it depends on what kind of food you eat, what quantity and quality, the diversity of the food you eat, but whether or not the food you need is available, accessible, and made desirable to you depends on a long line of people and processes. So you see here the diagram on the right that outlines the 4 main processes that are critical in making food appear on your table. And it's important to already notice that each of these processes is also shaped by contextual factors. some of them cultural, economic, environmental, and political. So we'll look separately at these 4 processes in more details in the following slides. So first of all, food production. So we tend to think that food comes from farmland, but it's more complicated than that. First of all, because farms produce more than food. They are asked to produce also feed for animal, fiber for clothing, and fuel for energy. So it's easy to remember the 4F: food, feed, fiber, fuel. And also we tend to forget that oceans and forests also provide a lot of the food we eat. So the stakeholders involved in this stage of the food supply chain are farmers, indigenous peoples, agribusinesses, land and plantation owners, fishers and fisheries, etc., etc. And what's at stake here is obviously food availability. With no production, I mean, we're past the stage where we can just pick the fruits and vegetables we need in nature. We need to produce the food we eat. But that creates land issues also because the food production is competing with these, feed production, fiber, and fuel production. So that links to issues of to the need to do some deforestation, and that creates an environmental footprint in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but also biodiversity loss. Now let's look at the food handling, storage, and processing stage. So that's where raw food materials are transformed into finished food products. For example, where grains get milled, sugar gets refined, livestock gets slaughtered, or eggs get cleaned and graded. That also includes some more complex activities such as bread making, meat processing, packaging frozen peas, for example, or processing vegetables to make salsa or any other finished products for that matter. So the stakeholders involved are many. The food industry has actually become highly diversified over the years. So that goes from small traditional family-run activities to large capital-intensive and highly mechanized industrial processes. And what's at stake here is food safety, because as you know, food and beverage handling can be linked to unsafe food, which may lead to foodborne illnesses and food poisoning in the consumers. What's at stake is also workers' rights, because food industry is also notoriously known for poverty level pay, unfortunately, and harsh working conditions and gender discriminations. And again, carbon footprint is a big concern at this stage of the process, because for several reasons, but mainly because of storage and cold storage, more particularly, that has a really big carbon footprint. Now let's look at food transportation and trade. So the international food trade has been developing rapidly over the recent decades. And now all the food basically that you eat, that you can think of, is traveling across oceans and continents, thanks to increasingly safe and efficient modes of transport. But of course, this comes again with a big environmental footprint. With the cargo ships having the lowest CO2 emissions, but you also have aeroplanes that have a big impact. The stakeholders involved goes from transporters, agribusiness, distributors, but also the policymakers and WTO negotiators, for example, because all this moving food around is highly regulated at the national and international levels. And so what's at stake here, we already mentioned carbon footprint, but it's also food availability, obviously. We can see that very acutely with the current Ukraine crisis, how global shocks can lead to a disruption in the food supply chain. And therefore, the dependence on food imports is a big criteria for vulnerability to global shocks, for example. I want also to highlight the importance of road infrastructures in moving food around, which sometimes is lacking in countries, and that's impeding people's access to good nutrition. And the last of the four main processes in the food supply chain is food retail, marketing, and consumptions. And that's where you want to think about the criteria that you use when you choose the food you eat. Is it mainly just because the food is available to you? Is it because it tastes good and because it was best marketed to you, because it was the cheapest, the easier to cook, because it's a local product? I mean, there is a variety of criteria that we use when we choose the food we eat. And spoiler alert, there are many stakeholders trying to influence your choice when it comes to food, and it's not necessarily towards a healthier diet. So the stakeholders involved here are retailers, vendors, marketing experts, restaurants, chefs, consumers, but also, again, the legislators, because there are tools to sort of influence consumers' choices, such as food labeling or food marketing regulations. And what's at stake here is indeed, again, food accessibility, but also affordability and desirability. And again, carbon footprint comes in the picture because packaging food is having a big carbon footprint. So let's look for a minute at the conceptual framework of food. This is drawn from the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition, but was adapted by for the UN Secretary General policy brief on the impact of COVID-19 on food security and nutrition. And they have simplified a little bit the framework, which is why I used this one, but you can see it's already quite complex. So basically the four processes that we've discussed are at the center in brown. And you can see that those are shaped by external drivers. And I mentioned that at the beginning, but of course, the environment you're in is going to play a role, but also, if you have access to innovation, technology, and infrastructure, the political context, the economic context, the social-cultural context, and the demographics will play an important role in influencing these four processes. And all this will create the food environment, which will then determine the availability, the affordability, the desirability, and the quality of the food you can have access to. Then you still get to choose what food you actually eat and how you prepare it, how you cook it, how you store it, how you eat it. And that will determine your diet in terms of quantity, quality, diversity, and safety, which, and we know that your diet will, in a large part, determine your health and your good nutrition. And that will also influence your social, economic, and environment. So to a large extent, you can have, both direction arrows in this diagram. I also want to highlight the fact that, policy, program, and institutional actions can help shape the food environment and the consumer behavior. I would actually add to that also the influence of the private sector that also shapes the food environment and consumer behaviors to a big extent. And this is my last slide, but I just wanted to remind everyone that, we're just looking at food systems today, and it's already highly complex, as we can see. But nutrition is not only determined by food systems, it's also determined by social protection systems and health systems. So social protection, for example, would mean that, social transfers for maternal and child nutrition, breastfeeding protection in the workplace, those interventions will be a big determinant for good nutrition. And in terms of the health system, Obviously, you know, the health system will be responsible for detecting severe malnutrition and treating it, counseling and support to breastfeeding, promoting healthy lifestyles, etc., etc. So that's it for this first part. That's really an introduction. And I suggest that we go now in breakout groups and sort of warm up by discussing some just very simple questions, but that you'll see are quite telling of how we perceive food systems. So I want you to think about the last meal that you had and try to reflect if you're able to tell how the food was produced and how who was involved in producing the food that you ate in your last meal. How did it travel to your table? And then you can also think about the most important elements that you consider when choosing the food you eat. So we'll allow 10 minutes for that. And I'll ask my colleague Sean to just launch the breakout groups now, and we'll regroup in about 10 minutes in plenary. That's okay.
Thanks, Barbara. And if I could just explain for those who prefer to communicate in French or Spanish, the way this will work is everyone will be assigned to a random breakout room. But if you want to speak in French or Spanish, then I just kindly ask that you remove yourself from the breakout room that you have been assigned to and return to the main room where there will be simultaneous interpretation available to you. So I'll launch the breakout room now, but if you find that you are with only English speakers and you can't understand, then please just leave the room and you'll return to the main room. And if you have any issues, I'm here to help move people around. So I'll open the rooms now. So hopefully you've all been invited to join your breakout room. So if you just accept the invitation, and then it will take you over to your breakout room.
Sean, except for the people who will stay in the plenary, right?
There are, yes, so I've not been able to identify everyone who wants to stay in the plenary. So those of you who I have identified, you will stay, and then anyone else can return if they've in the wrong place.
Okay. Okay. Alors. Let's go everywhere. Ok. Bonjour à tous. Est-ce que vous pouvez m'entendre? Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Je pense que là, vous pouvez... Je pense qu'il y en a certains... Oui, vous m'entendez? Hello.
Oui. Oui.
Bonjour, bonjour. Bonjour, bonjour. Normalement, les personnes qui restent ici sont francophones.
D'accord.
Est-ce que c'est le cas? Est-ce que tout le monde peut m'entendre?
Oui.
Excellent. Alors, je ne sais pas qui s'est mis en micro, mais est-ce que vous voulez partager vos impressions sur, sur les questions que nous avons partagées par rapport à voilà, quels sont les éléments que vous considérez quand vous choisissez la nourriture, ou vous choisissez votre nourriture? Est-ce que c'est le goût, l'accessibilité? Vous m'entendez? Alors, c'est un peu compliqué parce qu'en plus, j'ai l'impression que les noms se sont mal écrits. Alors, est-ce que vous m'entendez? Allô, allô? Est-ce que quelqu'un veut partager? Je ne sais pas si ça marche là. Est-ce que...
I think if you can hear me,
Oui.
I think that actually the problem is we have not many people in this main room.
Okay.
It's mostly just interpreters. So I'm going to go between the different rooms and see if there is anyone who is French and Spanish, and if they haven't removed themselves, I will try to move them.
Okay. But okay.
Is that
But I
okay?
can, yeah, that's fine. I just think that there are still a couple of people that are not interpreters in this room.
Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone in the plenary in this room wants to share, you can just unmute and do so now. I see Grace, Chukudu, or Tobias, Okello, Melik, maybe. Let's see. A lot of people join with my colleagues Nazgul's links, so are shown as Nazgul, but I know that's there are some different people here. Okay. Anyone? I don't think that was working. Tobias.
Yes, hello. I hope you're getting
You
me.
can hear me.
Yeah, I would like to just make some few. The last meal I ate was okra. Yeah,
Okay.
and then yeah, the food was produced locally by a group of farmers in a place called Gumbo, Sherikat area in South Sudan. Basically, the retailers or the local traders who buy directly from the farmers, and then they bring it to the main market in Juba. Basically, they use small trucks to transport it to the market, and that's how I went to the market, bought some okra and prepared for myself. The second question talks about what is the most important element. Let me read it well. Just a moment so that I can. What is the most important element you consider when choosing the food you eat? Yeah, I think one of the things is the taste of the food. I'll consider how tasty it is. The other thing is the nutritive or the component, the nutrition component in it, or the food value that I will get. It's also very important. The other one is the quality of the food. How good is the food that I'm going to consume? I'll look at it in terms of quality. I will also look at the price. Is it affordable? Is it something within my budget and so forth? Yeah, I think those are the few comments that I can make from my side. Over to you.
Thank you, Tobias. I'm really impressed at how much you know on the food that you have on your table. That's definitely not the case in my country. Most people won't be able to tell exactly where the food comes from, so that's really impressive. Does anyone else want to share? sorry, maybe Grace. I'm just yeah. Does anyone else want to share?
Yeah, thank you so much. Grace from WOW Field-Based Office. Yes, I'm Grace from WOW Field-Based Office. I'm a health officer.
Wonderful.
So based on the questions, the last meal that I ate last night was greens. That is called cowpeas. It comes out from cowpeas. So that one was locally produced in WOW. It's one of my traditional food that we prefer mostly, and it contains a lot of vitamin, like vitamin A. That is the type of food always we used to eat. And then it was prepared by me personally. And then the reason why I prepare it personally, because I want to know the quality, how it is to be cooked, the quality of cooking it, and the taste as well, and the quantity. Yeah, that is answer number one. I'm not much of nutrition, but I'm just trying. And then the question number two, what is the most important element you consider when choosing the food you eat? Okay, one, first of all, I need to look at, of course, here in South Sudan, most of us are depending on locally produced food, especially things like greens, vegetables. And when we come to food, we look at things like sorghum, maize, cassava. Yeah. And then we need to also consider the storage system. How do we store it? That is one thing we need to first consider. Is it stored in a very good, conducive environment? And then does it contain some weeds or not? Those are the factors that we need to also find out. And as we are choosing the type of food, we need also to consider the nutrient value. Does it contain some nutrients or not? Because we cannot rely on same type of food every day. So also I need to know the quantity that can satisfy each of us in the house. And then also the taste. That is also one of the most important things, especially when we come to the salt. I cannot add the salt as much as possible because it will harm our health. And then also in South Sudan, they do say that there are some type of food that can produce, when you eat it, produce a lot of milk for lactating mothers. So those are the things that we need to look at, especially the greens. In our culture, once you produce, you need to eat greens, well pested. That one will, it will inhibit the production of milk. So those are the things that we need to look at. I think that is all what I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. That's also very impressive in terms of the good knowledge that you have on nutrition already. Well, I guess this group is not really representative of the main population. I guess you guys know more about nutrition than most people, but still, it's really interesting to see. I believe that we need to go back to plenary now. But while my colleague is working on that, does anyone else wants to share? I've just randomly picked a few people, but
hi.
Yes,
Shahina here from Hashu Foundation. I will answer the first question that we were discussing, that the last meal that we were having. So it's like I'm from basically Pakistan, and we have a traditional food that's called biryani. It contains rice. So what I feel that the rice from farm, and there are so many who are involved in it, like the farmers, the community, their family, they help them to in the cultivation and other thing. And then there are specific spices and herbs involved, and those are also like taken from mountains. So the people who are living in mountains, and then there are transportation, and then how the rice is shifted to the industry and for the processing, and then they are packed. There are so many people and so many industries involved in packaging and other things. And then the buyers, then the shops, from whom we go, from whom we just buy the rice and then just make it convert it into biryani. So what I feel that everything is interconnected. The food and the people all around, the industries, which make it possible to even to reach us, the consumers, and have that food. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Meeting is being recorded.
This is excellent. So I think we are having, people are joining back in the plenary right now. Just wait just 1 second so people can share, can join back. All right, are we back in plenary? Sean, is it okay? Shall I continue?
Yep, all good. Please continue. Thanks,
Okay.
Barbara.
Thank you all, and thank you. I don't know about you guys, but we had a really interesting insights in our breakout group, and I was really impressed to see how much people actually know about the food that they eat and where it comes from. I think you'd be surprised to see in my country how little people know. So let's continue. In the next part, we'll look at the dysfunctions of the current food system. So, and we'll look more closely on the interlinkages between food systems, nutrition, and climate change. So first of all, let's dive right into it. Food systems globally are failing people, and that's not a judgment from me. It's just a concrete fact. There are an estimated 3.1 billion people who cannot afford a healthy diet worldwide. And that's the latest number that was shared yesterday, actually, by the SOFI report, the State of Nutrition and Food Security in the World report. That's really an impressive number. I mean, just let's pause and reflect 1 second on this. It's just almost half of the world's population that just cannot afford a healthy diet. And as you can see on this map, the burden isn't equally shared. It's mostly in Asia and in Africa that people cannot afford a healthy diet. So that's a major dysfunction of the food systems, right? Now, food systems are also failing children because with the current trends, it's going to be extremely difficult to reach the 2030 targets. And all the targets that we have set for ourselves in 2015 are basically going in the wrong direction. Even though stunting did progress, or the decrease of stunting did progress, it's now at risk due to climate, conflict, and COVID-19. Wasting is not progressing anymore, and overweight is actually increasing. So, you know, if we don't do anything, in 2030, 670 million of people, or 8% of the population, will still face hunger in 2030. Which is depressingly the same figure as when the global goals were created in 2015. And if we look more closely at undernutrition, out of the 2.3 billion who face either moderate and severe food insecurity in the world, again, the burden is not equally shared. You can see from this graph that Asia and Africa pay the highest price. And right now, Africa and Asia account for more than 9 out of 10 of all children with stunting, and 9 out of 10 of all children with wasting. And even the majority of children who are affected by overweight worldwide also live in these 2 continents. And frankly speaking, don't want to depress you guys, but the outlook for 2022 and beyond is not looking good. There is an alarming trend of acute food insecurity and malnutrition, and it's expected to persist or even increase. There are major deteriorations anticipated in northern Nigeria, Yemen, Burkina Faso, and Niger due to conflict, but also in Kenya, South Sudan, and Somalia, the whole Horn of Africa due to the impact of climate change and consecutive seasons of below average rains. The secondary impact of COVID-19 are still being felt. And now we have also the unfolding war in Ukraine, which, as you know, is disrupting in a major way the global food systems. So the two graphs that I've put here are drawn from the global reported food crisis from 2022. And you can see that the number of people facing an IPC phase 5 level, which is a catastrophic one, and I will read you the description in a moment, is the highest number in the report's history. And just let me read you what's the phase 5 is. It's households have an extreme lack of food and other basic needs, even after full employment of coping strategy. Starvation, death, destitution, and extremely critical acute malnutrition levels are evident. Urgent action is required to prevent widespread death and total collapse of livelihoods. So it's a very, 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 very serious situation right now we're in. And what's frustrating about it is that when you think that, people are starving in the world, you think, yeah, maybe there is not enough food to feed everyone because, the human population has grown so fast. But when you look more closely, that's actually not true. The world has no global shortage of food. Global food production has actually increased by 300% since the mid-60s. So it's faster than the rate of the global population growth. What's at stake here is more an issue of affordability. So we've seen that 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. And we have to remind ourselves that's very much linked with the levels of extreme poverty we still see in the world, with half of the world's population still living on less than $2.5 a day, an additional 1.3 billion people living on less than $1.25 a day. So that's not necessarily because food is too expensive, it's because people are too poor. There is a question also on accessibility, because moving food around is often problematic, either for lack of proper infrastructure, because of conflicts or export restrictions. We see that again very acutely today with the Ukraine crisis. And that links with the issue of food sovereignty and with many countries being over-dependent on food imports today. And so they're very, very vulnerable whenever there is a global shock that restricts exports. And last but not least, there is also the issue of food waste, which in itself is quite shocking. In the figure globally is that between 20% and 30% of all the food produced globally, all the food that is intended for human consumption, is wasted or lost. And that is enough to feed 3 billion people. So you remember the 3 billion people who cannot afford a healthy diet? Well, there is 3 billion people who could do so if we weren't wasting so much food. And I've read somewhere that an area larger than China is used to grow food that is never eaten. So it shows you how dysfunctional our current food systems is. And that's not even the end of the picture. One also major symptom of the dysfunction of the food system is the pandemic of obesity that we're seeing worldwide, with the numbers of obese people having nearly tripled since 1975. And today there is more people that are obese than underweight in every region except sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. It's about 40% of adults who are obese, who are overweight, and 13% who are obese. And it's also growing very rapidly within the children under 5 population. And we tend to think that this is a high income problem, but it's really not, or at least it's rising quite dramatically and at a dramatic rate in low and middle income countries, including in rural settings now. And for example, the vast majority of overweight and obese children now live in developing countries where the rate of increase has been more than 30% higher than that of developed. And so, preparing for this training, I've reflected on that a lot and tried to understand why it seems so paradoxical, right? That that obesity is developing at such a fast rate when in countries where undernutrition is already a huge issue. And I found that one of the reasons behind this paradox is that food systems actually emphasize quantity over quality. And they have this calorie-based approach with the industrial agriculture producing mainly commodity crops that are used in a wide variety of inexpensive and calorie-dense foods. That is not conducive for good nutrition. It actually fails to meet nutritional recommendations such as fruits, vegetables, because today about 60% of all dietary energy that the world consumes is derived from just 3 cereal crops: rice, maize, and wheat. And obviously that's not going to lead to good nutrition outcomes. This is one aspect. But then the other aspect is that junk food is heavily marketed, especially compared to healthy food. I mean, you never see, barely see advertisement for fruits and vegetables. And so the popularity of processed and packaged and prepared foods has increased in almost all communities worldwide. And that's problematic and leading to the development of non-communicable diseases, because this junk food is often full of additives and full of sugar, which WHO has coined as one of the main drivers of the obesity pandemic. So paradoxically, unhealthy food has become cheaper, more accessible, and easier to store than fresh, healthy food. So logically, people with little income tend to opt for junk food. And that's why you can really see in every country that obesity and poverty are highly correlated. Even in developed countries, people who are overweight and obese tend to belong to disadvantaged communities. So we've looked at how the food systems is basically failing nutrition of people, but now we'll look in the following slides at food systems and the planet. So yeah, you can see a little poll popping up, and I'll ask you to just vote as to what extent, if any, do you think our food production and consumption threaten nature? You can vote it's not a threat at all, it's not a significant threat, it's a significant threat, or it is the greatest threat. I'll just give you a couple seconds to do that. Okay, we can see the trend here is people voting in majority that it's a significant threat. Yeah. A few people still think that it's not a significant threat, at least one person. And 6 out of 24 who have voted think that it's the greatest threat. And that's actually the right answer. The way we produce and consume food has been identified as the single biggest threat to nature, because it contributes up to 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions, and it's responsible for 80% of biodiversity loss and consumes 70% of all the freshwater resources that are available for human use. Sorry, stop sharing. Okay. So let's look for a minute at food systems and greenhouse gas emissions. Food systems contribute, as I mentioned, about 30% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. So in itself, that's already a big contribution to global warming and climate change. But what's interesting to see here is that half of those emissions are actually attributable to livestock raising, or let's say intensive livestock raising. And that's mainly through deforestation that is done to make space to grow feed for the livestock, but also because of the gases that are biologically released by the animals, such as nitrous oxide and methane. And methane is actually a even more potent gas, greenhouse gas, than carbon dioxide. So it plays a big role. That's why many people recommend to lower meat consumption, particularly in developed countries which have the biggest consumption of meat, in order to fight climate change. That's clearly not anecdotal. It's a really important thing to have in mind. Then you can see how food systems impact biodiversity. It's definitely one of the major contributors to biodiversity loss. That's because our current agricultural system is dominated by monocultures. I mentioned that only a few crop species, so rice, wheat, and maize, provide half of the world's plant-derived calories. And monocultures have the particularity of being very water demanding, and they're often combined with heavy use of pesticides, agri chemicals, such as fertilizers. And that has a really devastating consequence for pollinators. It pollutes groundwaters, it degrades soil qualities, and that affects the carbon sequestration potential of the soil. So it's really a perfect storm. Monocultures are really a major contributor of biodiversity loss. And we estimate right now that already a third of the world's soil is estimated to be highly degraded. Then in terms of animals, I think that, today we have 94% of all the mammal biomass, excluding humans, that is livestock. It's quite striking when you think about that, right? And even this livestock genetic diversity is now endangered because back in the 20th century we used to have several thousands of different species of livestock that were raised, and now it's down to about 500. When it comes to fish, it's also quite scary. Now we have overfishing is responsible for about a third of all fisheries to have collapsed. And fish is a really very important source of nutrition for a large number of people. About 4 billion people rely on it for protein and micronutrients. And so clearly food systems are contributing quite dramatically to climate change and biodiversity loss. But when you look at it the other way, you have a boomerang effect where actually climate change in turns affects food systems, and particularly actually nutrition foods within the food systems. First of all, because global warming is leading to freshwater stress and more environmental hazards, such as floods, droughts, and wildfires. And global warming is also leading to ocean acidifications. And all this is affecting the ecosystems, the natural ecosystems on which many people depend for their livelihoods and for getting their nutritious foods. It's also diminishing access to clean water, which has implications on sanitation and health risks, and can really affect people's ability to absorb the nutrients. And then we can see that, unfortunately, nutrient-rich foods are often the most susceptible to change in temperatures, and they are more likely to get spoiled in case of extreme temperatures. One thing that has been very well documented now scientifically is that higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere have been proven to reduce the nutrient content of the food we grow. So there will be less iron, less zinc, so the food will be less nutritious, basically under a changing climate that's with an atmosphere richer in CO2. And yeah, obviously, if you have environmental hazards, it can also affect the accessibility and the availability of the food that is grown. So it's definitely a bidirectional relationship between food systems and climate change. And so here I really want to, I mean, I hope it's come across quite clearly already, but there is really a need for urgent action. According to the World Bank, at 2 degrees of warming, there are 100 to 400 million more people that could be at risk of hunger. And 1 to 2 billion more people may no longer have access to adequate water. And, you know, a large part of the world's land surface will be altered. So basically, the point I want to make here is that we need both mitigation measures and adaptation measures. That's the vocabulary that is used in climate change fora, but basically mitigation measures mean that we need to reduce the food system's impact on the planet by reducing greenhouse gas emission, by avoiding this crazy biodiversity loss that we're seeing right now. But at the same time, we won't be able to stop climate change now, and we need to adapt and ensure that we still find ways to keep providing nutritious foods to people under climate change climate and temperatures that would rise, that will rise for a couple, at least a little bit, hopefully we'll keep it manageable. And I'm almost through, but just wanted to take 1 minute to just reflect on the fact that there is an injustice when you think about all this, because climate change is disproportionately affecting poor people and low-income countries, when those people are definitely those who have contributed the least to climate change. And they already have, these countries already have the highest burden of malnutrition. And so potentially they are even less resilient when it comes to adapting to a changing climate. So this is my last slide. Just wanted to show you how, when you think about ideal food systems, because we're working on nutrition, we tend to think only through a nutrition lens. But if we want to have nutritious food systems, we also need these food systems to be inclusive. We need them to be resilient, sustainable, and productive. And really, good nutrition is intrinsically linked to all. And we cannot think of food system just as producing nutritious food. We need also to think in terms of sustainability and to think in terms of the economic, social, and environmental aspects to it. All right, that's it for part 2. So now we will go into breakout groups again. And if that's okay, I would like us to discuss the most significant food systems challenges that are affecting your countries or from your standpoint, and really try to reflect on everything you've heard and think what applies most obviously to your particular context. So Sean, if I can ask you maybe to launch the breakout groups now. Okay. Hey. So, on a side. So I think those people who are still in the plenary are, I mean, in my breakout group. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes. So
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Who wants to share? Please go ahead. I have done enough talking for now. Just want to listen to you guys. What are the most significant food system challenges that you see in your particular context?
Hi, my name is Aji. I came in very late, so I would love to hear everybody else. Because I was logged in so late. The links were not working. So I would love to hear the contributions so that I can learn also. So if you were here before me, please go ahead.
Thank you, Aji, for breaking the ice. So anyone? I see.
I can go.
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you very much for your presentation. I've been loving it, and I'm hoping maybe to be shared by email afterwards.
Of course.
Of course. Thank you. So anyway, I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, and I don't know, just as you know, right now there's a lot of like, if for example I look at the north, there's a drought going on in the north, and there's a lot of famine in the north. So that is northern Kenya and also bordering Ethiopia. But also when I just come back to Nairobi, accessibility is quite, because like a tomato or two retailing at exorbitant prices compared to even other parts of the country where it is actually grown, maybe in the central part. But really, right now, just the cost of the cost of food generally is just through the roof. You know, it could be. I mean, obviously, it is part of it is because of the global fuel prices, the pandemic, the war. So, I mean, also even the political aspect of it in my country right now is an aspect, because we're just going to the election in the next few weeks. So that is also a contributing factor. But just the cost of food is through the roof. I mean, you're lucky to have even 2 meals a day, which is, you know, which is quite discouraging, because then how is one supposed to be a productive human being if you cannot get access to good, nutritious food, you know? At the same time, there's a lot of, at least just in my thinking or in my experience, there's a lot of, you know, heavy marketing by international brands selling their, you know, selling their international food chains, selling their food locally. So it's a lot of things, you know, coming together to just create a perfect storm of food inaccessibility, you know, and affordability is a big issue. You know, again, as I was mentioning, the international chains just being also heavily marketing their products. So it is quite a discouraging aspect, or a discouraging scenario. At the same time, food loss and food waste is also a thing, especially food loss owing to poor infrastructure, possibly other, you know, transportation, storage, value addition. All these are just coming together to create a perfect storm, to create, you know, basically a scenario where food that is meant for human consumption does not reach the person it is intended for, you know. So it's so many things coming together. But anyway, I'm also more than glad to listen to other people's thoughts, wherever they may be. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, I see Murtala.
Hi, Shahina here again from Hashu Foundation. Well, what I feel from Pakistan, being a Pakistani, and the current situation and the significant, challenges that in our country for food affecting nutrition is basically the climate change, the weather pattern, and the nutritional facts. And we have to use the fertilizers in terms they are interconnected, as my previous colleague said. So obviously there are social economical issues, but the most I feel the alarming thing that is affecting our nutrition is basically climate change, because of the floods and the droughts and the rain pattern and everything. It is exploiting the fertility of the soil, and therefore indirectly or directly the production system is disturbed, and even the farmers are going towards highly chemicalized fertilizers. They are reducing the nutritional things in the crops. So for me, it's like the climate change.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it's quite striking to me how you guys are facing really this firsthand. Anyone else wants to share? Please go ahead. This is your chance to share your stories. I can hear some background noise, but anyone else wants to take the floor? Hello. Et s'il y a quelqu'un qui veut parler en français, vous pouvez aussi. Et il y a des interprètes en ligne qui peuvent traduire. Okay. I see Alain.
Hello.
Yes. Hello. Yeah, you can speak. We can hear you.
Can I speak?
Yes, please do.
Okay. I just want to contribute to what other speakers says. I'm speaking from Nigeria. The major factor of food challenge in the country is basically centered to two aspects. Now, the political will, and also the aspect of the crisis going on in the northern part of the country. Or not just only the northern part, even the eastern part of the country, northeast, the northern part and the eastern part are in severe crisis of the herdsmen, where people can't go to farm. Those who, the northern part of the country has the chunk capacity of producing food. Now, farmers can't go to their farms because they are being killed on their farmland. So that has been a major threat. Example now, I am into animal husbandry, and I source my livestock from the north. But because of the banditry and the terrorism issue and crisis in those regions, that has limited the inflow of even people from the southern part to go and get maybe livestock or food commodities. And that has made things very expensive within the southern region. Because where the southern region is not really into a long-time farming, or let me say does not produce much that can sustain. We depend basically we depend on some part of the north for food, and the threats of insecurity, the conflict has been a major constraint to supply of food. So that is my own aspect, my view. Then there is no political will in sustainable food production in the country, because if there have been maybe strategies of maybe mitigating those crises, I guess the conflict of food at the high increase will have been managed. So that's just what I can say for now.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Conflict is definitely another aspect that is impeding access to food and good nutrition. Anyone else? I don't know. There is a lot of background noise. If people who don't want to speak can mute, that'd be great. Cool. I see Amir or Edwin or Emmanuel, Grace, anyone, please take the floor.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Madam. I'm talking from South Sudan. Based on my experience as a South Sudanese, one of the most challenges that we are affecting here is we have been affected with this, there's rain pattern, as one of my colleagues stated, and then two, there's insecurity in the country, and then three, South Sudan, they don't produce their products from South Sudan, they are depending from the neighboring countries. Like most of the food is being exported from Uganda, Kenya, yeah, and Sudan. So this is one of the major challenges, and this lead to prices of food shooting up in the market. Even the mere vegetables like tomatoes, onions, these things are all coming from the neighboring countries. So you can see this one, the high rate of violence, it shoot up because most of the people are vulnerable. They are really urging so much for food. And previously, WFP was providing food, but of recent we had they are dropping out. So this one can really lead to a very serious issues. And there are so many malnutrition cases as a result of this because they are not producing their own food. They are relying from the neighboring countries. And then the issue of the insecurities because though it rains, currently there's rain. Though it rains, it's very hard for them to go and cultivate. Once you go to your farm, you will fall into so many threats, you'll be raped, you'll be killed. So those are some of the challenges that it's really facing here in South Sudan, and there will be too much food crisis in the market and in the country in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think people are rejoining the plenary room now. All right, thank you so much for sharing. I hope you had good discussions and you were able to share your experiences. I was really, really amazed by the stories that were shared in the group I was in, and how, you know, how people are experiencing all these challenges very heads-on, particularly the conflicts and the violence that impede food and nutrition access. Okay, I think we can continue. I see people are still rejoining the main room. Okay. So in this third part, we will be looking at you know, what does it mean, what the food systems mean for policy making and implementation. Oh, sorry, yeah, I forgot. We will do a quick poll. Going back to the question that we have discussed in breakout groups, and yeah, if you can take a few seconds to vote on, you know, which of these food systems challenges are having the greatest impact in your own countries. I do realize that conflict is not in there, so apologies for that. Just allowing a few more seconds for people to vote. Interesting to see how climate change is coming up quite high on the poll. Yeah, I'm really sorry for not having including violence and conflicts on this poll, because I think that's a major issue in many of our Sun countries. At least that's what came through in our discussion in my group. All right, so climate change is coming up at the first one. That's super interesting. And then lack of investment in local food systems, lack of public awareness of what constitutes a healthy diet. Healthy foods are too expensive. Okay, that's super interesting. I'll continue, but you can keep voting, I think, and we will share the results in our report of this training that will disseminate it. All right, thank you. Let's move to part 3. So what is a food systems approach to policymaking and implementation, and what can you do about it to foster food systems transformation? So first of all, I wanted to give you a little bit of context because at global level, there is definitely an unprecedented momentum for food systems transformation. And that's mainly due to the UN Food Systems Summit that was convened by the UN Secretary General in September 2021, and that gathered hundreds of thousands of people from around the world and across all constituencies. And we had many commitments taken at the summit. One interesting thing is that in the process leading to the summit, people were encouraged to organize national food systems dialogues. And I hope you have participated in some of those, or some of you have participated in those. And those dialogues have resulted in national pathways to sustainable food systems. And those are published on the website. I've put the link in the presentation, and I do confirm that I will send the presentation afterwards, so you'll get all these materials. And these pathways are supposed to be supported by global coalitions at the global level. I've put a few of them here, but there are many more. And you can see that on their website. I've put the link for each coalition, but then you can look at all the other coalitions that are available. And in my opinion, there was definitely some good successes in this process and in the summit, in that it gave really truly unprecedented visibility of the food systems agenda, and a sort of a sense of urgency and the need to transform food systems. It also successfully bridged between the food agenda and the climate and biodiversity agenda. And basically, it was a good effort to take a systemic and inclusive approach. However, the summit was also heavily criticized, particularly by civil society, and particularly by a civil society group that is called the CSN, for a mechanism for relations with the UN Committee on World Food Security. And so the CSM has criticized the UN Food Systems Summit on the ground that it did not properly address conflicts of interest, or at least, not in a truly satisfactory manner. And therefore, it appeared to promote a corporate-led agenda and to favor corporate technological solutions over the solutions that are traditionally promoted by civil society, such as agroecology, organic farming, indigenous knowledge, etc. And also, people felt that the summit organizers did not do enough to enable the meaningful representation of people that are most affected by food systems transformation. And so definitely one of the core problems within the summit's approach is that it did not necessarily take into account the fact that communities usually know themselves what their problems are and how best they can solve them. And therefore, food sovereignty was largely ignored in the summit. So what's food sovereignty? for people who are not familiar with this concept, food sovereignty is defined as the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food that is produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. And I've put that in bold because I think that's really what stands out in this approach. And food sovereignty is really conceived as an alternative political framework for food and nutrition security. And it has grown as a counter movement to the dominance of industrial practices. It's sort of acknowledge or recognizing that today decisions about what is produced, how it is produced, what is consumed, and who has access to food is largely determined by multinational corporations and agribusinesses, which in some instances control entire food chains and deploy immense lobbying efforts to influence governments and trade rules. And in some instances, in these tactics, hunger is sometimes instrumentalized to, for example, lift the ban on the use of GMOs, or to push for the convergence of diets towards more imported and processed foods, for example. And that's what the food sovereignty movement is fighting for, is fighting against, let's say. And so presenting you all these different ways to see the food systems, I just want to recognize that it's basically practically impossible to have the entire picture, because there are so many factors that come into play when it comes to delivering good nutrition. It's like this elephant on the picture, and everyone's look at it from a different angle. And if you just, those are blindfolded people, and they look at just one part of the elephant and they think it's a completely different thing. So one thing, it's a fan, the other it's a rope, the other it's a wall, a snake, a tree, a spear. So just to show you that, yeah, we all have our different perspectives, and that's okay. And we won't be able to have one aligned vision, but what we can do is to weave all the perspectives together. And that's why I put this quote from Gerda Verburg, the Sun Movement coordinator here, which I really like. And the importance, so it's to really collaborate with each other, weave perspective together, and try to have a vision, a common vision, but acknowledging that the strategies will differ and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. There is no silver bullet, but also recognizing that currently the food systems clearly is not working in the right direction. We've seen all the dysfunctions in part 2, and it's really critical that we do things differently. And if we want to do things differently, we need to think differently. So in the words of Albert Einstein, if we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, right? So we need to think differently. The challenge that we have now, it's that we're already in 2 feet deep in the crisis, and in times of acute crisis, nutrition tends to be overlooked. That's just a fact. And we've seen that in, the G7 came together a few days ago and came up with this declaration, and it's a welcome engagement. They came up with this additional $4.5 billion, and they launched this new global alliance for food security. And I mean, one can only rejoice from such a move, but at the same time, I'm thinking, is it really a new way of thinking? Are they really willing to go beyond business as usual, which clearly hasn't worked up to now? There is a glimmer of hope, because in the declaration, there is a commitment to strengthen and not undermine the long-term resilience and sustainability of agriculture and food systems, which, to the best of my knowledge, is the first time that G7 recognizes that. But will that be enough to go beyond the Band-Aid approach of emergency response? I'm not sure. Clearly, the SOFI report that was launched yesterday highlighted that we need a change that is deeper than that. We need to really change gears, but we also need to change strategies. And in addition to more money, we need to change the way we use the money that we have. And the SOFI 2022 really warns that a significant proportion of the support that currently governments give to food and agriculture is actually distorting the markets, and it harms small-scale food producers and indigenous peoples. The support that they give actually incentivizes damaging the environment, and it fails to deliver the healthy diets to the most vulnerable. So we need to change approaches. So here I'd like to offer you a few changes of mindset that could help transform the way we think about food. First of all, we must stop thinking in terms of feeding the world at the global level, but think in terms of healthily nourished people to build resilient communities. And therefore, nutrition must be fully integrated into food policies, including in the design and delivery of emergency food security responses. It's critical, otherwise we're just setting ourselves for failure at a later stage. So we need to take this lesson now and act on and integrate nutrition in everything we do, even in times of crisis. Secondly, we need to stop seeing agriculture just in terms of maximizing outputs, but also in terms of rewarding ecosystem services. And that will help us support more diverse agriculture, one that protects biodiversity and replenishes its soils, and that increases the resilience of farmers and the diversity of diets, and eventually giving improved nutrition outcomes. Thirdly, we need to stop seeing food as a commodity, but start envisioning food as shaping our societies and our economies. And therefore, food speculation needs to be curbed. In one nice track that was discussed during the Food Systems Summit was how we could have fairer food prices by including externalities in the food prices. And by externalities, I mean including everything that is involved in the making of this food, not only in terms of productive assets, but in terms of ecological effects, environmental quality, greenhouse gas emissions, animal welfare, social and public health costs. And if you do that, and if all that is reflected in the food prices, then you would attract investments where capital creates the most social and environmental value. I know it's a long way to go, it's a long shot, but it's a really interesting idea to start developing, I think. And fourth, we need to stop standardizing the diets, but we need to value local food more and the diversity and the local resources much more. So we must invest in local food systems, promote local crops, healthy and tasty food that are available and affordable right there in the countries where people are, or in the context where people are. And we see that very acutely in the Ukraine crisis right now, where we put all this focus on wheat, but maybe that's an opportunity also to revalue other cereals that are, traditionally growing in the context where people need them, and so therefore are naturally more resilient, and could be a really good alternative to wheat in many contexts, and would decrease the over-reliance on imports, and that's a really important factor of resilience. And basically, underlying all these changes of mindset, underlying all these changes of mindset is the need to reconnect with nature. Because if we don't do so, if we keep seeing ourselves as disconnected from nature, and I'm speaking from a global perspective, that's definitely more a problem of developed countries than developing countries, but clearly the way we do business right now is endangering life as we know it on the planet. And we must recognize that food connects us all, and it also connects us with our planet and with nature. So what's good for us is good for the planet and vice versa. All thriving is mutual. So I just wanted to pause here for a minute and show you this video that shows
Human beings have.
Sorry, I hope you can hear it. So I'll just show you this video that it's just a few minutes, explains very clearly what this approach is about, and it explains the concept of regenerative food systems and how it's linked with the agroecological approaches and indigenous practices.
have faced many important questions throughout time. But there's one that's been with us from the very beginning. What's for dinner? The answer goes beyond our plates. Food shapes our cultures, our economies, our very planet, but not always in a positive way. Many of our current production methods are actually harming nature, which in turn harms our ability to keep growing food in the future. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can produce food in ways that nurture the planet. That's the whole point behind regenerative food systems, to produce food in ways that don't just avoid harm, but actively restore nature, reversing some of our damage to the planet. Let's widen the lens and look at things from a broader perspective. See how everything is connected, from the tiniest soil-enriching microbes all the way to fields, farms, fisheries, and the whole chain of actors designed to bring food to our tables. It's not us and nature. We're all part of the same system. But this system is in dire need of transformation. Regenerative food systems help the world's farmers, fishers, and ranchers to restore nature by doing what they do best, providing people with food. What does this look like? On land, using cover crops between harvests or planting crops without tilling the soil helps restore the complex soil biology farms need to produce food for many.
And it seemed like we weren't headed in the direction we were supposed to. This notion of survival of the
many years to come. Know what else it does? Reduce greenhouse gas emissions and water pollution. At sea, aquaculture, the practice of growing food in the water, can be a real game changer when it's done right. Consider oysters. You don't even have to feed them. They get their nutrients by actually filtering the water, improving the quality of their environment as they eat. Or seaweed, it stores carbon and helps fight climate change without even leaving the seabed. And while these terms may be new, the methods are not. Indigenous people have been using many of these nurturing practices for thousands of years. And that's just a drop in the ocean of possibilities that regenerative food systems can offer, as they actively embrace the diversity that makes food so much more than just eating, and growing so much more than just producing. We now face a choice, one that goes beyond our daily dinner. Do we stick with our current menu, or do we give nature a seat at the table?
All right. Yeah, apologies for the technical glitches here, but I hope you enjoyed this video. So basically, if we want to change our mindsets, and then we need to change our worldviews, our beliefs, basically the way we look at foods and the food systems. So there are some interesting initiatives, including one by UNDP that is called the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, that really looks at how we can build the inner foundations for sustainability and regenerative practices. It's basically promoting transformative practices for reconnecting with ourselves, each other, and nature. So if you are interested in this initiative, I'd be happy to give you more information at the end of the presentation, or you can feel free to contact me afterwards. So concretely, what are the entry points for food systems transformation? I've put here all the sort of the traditional areas of action for food systems. But what I want to highlight here, and we will look at those items in more details afterwards, is the need to weave, to think in terms of not only food availability, but also to think in terms of diversity, affordability, desirability, which is very important, and sustainability in everything that we do when we think about food systems. And this way, we really have a food systems approach that's complete, let's say. So what can CSN members do?
Right.
And this is so just, yeah, looking more in more details at the policies and legislation. I mean, you can broaden the focus on your policy and legislative work if you have one. You know, usually some stakeholders tend to focus on food fortification and breastfeeding, which are important, but you can broaden that and look also at what affects the availability, diversity, affordability, desirability, and sustainability of foods. So, for example, the regulation of food marketing, the regulation of food loss and waste, if there is any, or just advocate for one. Food trade, agricultural and natural resource management policies, social protection and food subsidies. Those are really areas that are critical to look at if you are really serious about looking at food systems and nutrition. You can engage with food systems actor. You know, if it's not the case already, I really encourage you to connect the dots with the food systems pathways and the people who were behind it, and to ensure that nutrition features highly and that there is a good balance between people and planet. Because one sort of pitfall for people who came up with those food systems pathways was to look at it purely from an environmental perspective, which is already a big part and very important, but also we need to balance it with the people's needs as well in terms of nutrition. And then you can look at national nutrition plans and encourage national food and nutrition actors to integrate a food systems approach into the national nutrition plans. What you can do as well is look at possibly having campaigns on healthy and sustainable diets to empower consumers to make healthy and environmentally friendly food choices, particularly in urban settings where you know, people are subjected to so much marketing of unhealthy foods. You can look at public investments, you know, really look at stepping up advocacy efforts to align health and agriculture, as well as also environment-related policies, and advocate for improved investments on food systems approaches and nutrition. And also you can look at national food-based dietary guidelines and advocate for the adoption of those guidelines. I will send you the link to the CFS, the Committee of World Food Security has come up with a set of, you know, voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition that can serve as a sort of a reference for national guidelines. And it's really an interesting tool to use. It can help to shape national public awareness campaigns, food regulations, set standards for school meals, food assistance programs. So it has all sorts of use and can be really sort of a global reference. And it's really important that civil society has its say in the making of those guidelines. And then at the global level, and that's for us at the Secretariat, but also, I mean, we need to be mandated by you to act on this. And what we could do is really start to raise much more the visibility of the food systems dysfunctions that are faced by some countries, to amplify the some stakeholders' voices around climate change impact on nutrition security. And we could advocate for a profound transformation of the global food systems at the global level, from, you know, moving away from a food industry-based model to a model based on regenerative production and local food systems, and one that are geared towards providing for people's nutritional needs and at the same time preserving nature and the sustainability of food production. And last but not least, one thing we could do at global level is connecting climate and nutrition activists, especially the youth, and we're trying to do that already, to sort of piggyback on the momentum that unfortunately climate change is having at the global level and will continue to have, in order to elevate nutrition as key to a sustainable, healthier future for all. And with that, I suggest that we go into our last breakout group discussion. And the questions here to discuss are around the priority actions that you think should be taken in your country to transform food systems. And also if you have any opinions or elements to share as to what the Sun movement should prioritize, we would be very happy to hear that and record that. So let's go to breakout groups. Hello, can you hear me in the breakout group?
Yes, please.
Yeah, please go ahead if anyone wants to share the priority actions that you think should be taken in your country, or anything you think the Sun movement should prioritize. It's your chance to tell us.
Yeah, I could share something.
Cool, please do.
Awesome. So just as I was earlier talking about different things coming together to create a perfect storm, I feel as though where we are right now, government, and I'm speaking specifically to my government, my Kenyan government, and by extension to, so like what I feel should be done is that this should be given more priority than other aspects of socioeconomic growth and all of this, because it is not just one thing. It is not just the cost of food or famine, or it's a lot of things happening at the same time to create the perfect storm. So they all need addressing, and the best way to do this is to give food the priority it deserves at the table of importance, at the policy level, meaning at the national policy level, at the county policy level. And this is something I feel is not yet happening. I mean, we know about, food crisis and all of this, but it is not given the importance it deserves to be able to enact the action needed to move forward in a positive way or in a positive trajectory. So for me, the first step is just are we giving it enough importance? Are we giving it enough credence to know that where we are at a crisis, and 2030 is fast approaching. We are less than 8 years to 2030. If we do not do something now, then when are we planning to do this? And the best way to start thinking is to, first of all, just put it on the pedestal of importance that it deserves to be on. Thanks.
Thanks. Yes, I couldn't agree more. Anyone else? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet, maybe? I see Jane, Mamadou, Sauko, Serge.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Jane. Jane is speaking from Nigeria.
Okay.
For me, I think following the COVID, the pandemic, we've seen food insecurity at its high, yes, ever. We've seen countries moving toward having droughts and famine and all those issues. This is not good. And speaking from Nigeria, we've had several insecurity issues. So farmers are not going to the farms because of insecurity. We've had bandits, terrorists, farmer-header clashes. And so this is affecting food from farm to the tables of even the most vulnerable groups. So this is not good. For me, top on my list would be policy and legislation. We think that some policies that could affect food security should be developed and implemented so that farmers can go to their farms safely, and then the food systems and structures are not affected as a result of the insecurity and other forces. So in terms of policies, I think policy in terms of implementation, allocation of funds for those policies to be implemented are very, very important. Intentional decision by government and also other stakeholders in ensuring that these policies are driven and implemented is also very key. Policies around social protection, resource management, and also food subsidies are key to ensuring that the country is food secured. And then secondly, top on my list is campaigns. I think that behavioral change is something that would change, would be possible if there are country-wide driven campaigns on healthy and sustainable diets. There's been a lot of talk on household, even if it's planting in buckets at household levels, and then community farms, or farms owned by communities. I think such communication, such campaigns on the importance of healthy and sustainable diets at all levels should be a priority for the government in my country. So those are the issues I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. Yeah, that's very interesting. And yeah, I definitely sure the need to do more information and awareness raising around healthy and sustainable diets. Who else wants to share? We'll still have 5 minutes, about 5 minutes.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just quickly, my name is Silas. I'm from Kelling Resource Foundation, member of CSN Nigeria also. Jane has talked on some of the things, but I just want to contextualize it by saying our government needs to improve on their responsibility to its citizens. So if you're a government, you need to know that your people need to survive, they need to live, they need to have access to most of the services you provide for them. So it's not just making policy actions. Beyond policy, they need to be very responsible. So government need to realize that component. Just to add this to what Jane has spoken there and earlier, there are a lot of things put in place, but government's responsibility towards this action does not really translate. So you need to improve our responsibility, make the farms very safe. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah, that's definitely a deep-rooted issue here to be worked on, but that's a very important topic. I agree. We still have time for a couple more. Yes, hello.
I'm Starlet Makota from Zimbabwe. I just wanted to share a few of my thoughts regarding priority actions and challenges in food systems, specifically in my country. Yeah, so when we look at food systems, we're talking about all the processes from the farm to the fork. But when we look at Zimbabwe, I would say in terms of policy, yes, we've got very good policies that have already been put in place, but maybe the challenges are on policy implementation. And some of the challenges that we are facing, for instance, in terms of the agriculture, in terms of the economic, especially in terms of the agricultural sector, some of them like challenges that are not controllable if we look at the amount of rains that we might receive vis-a-vis what we expect for us to have a bumper harvest. So yeah, some of them are economical challenges. So you'll see that in terms of addressing the food system issues, it needs a multi-sectoral approach. It needs all sectors to be involved to ensure that our food systems increase. are better positioned. But for the nutrition part, alone we are not able to achieve the goals for transformed food systems. We really need to be backed, especially by agricultural production. So there is also some need maybe in terms of awareness and advocacy regarding better ways of maybe, let's say, agricultural production. For instance, if we look at Zimbabwe, we might say instead of having the normal maize crop, we might now start advocating for small grains because of the challenges in terms of the rains. So issues also that have to do with resilience building have also to be really incorporated in terms of when we look at food systems, because you will see that we are also faced with pandemics, but we need the food systems to continue to be functional. So communities, governments have also to now think outside the box to see how the food systems can even survive the unforeseen challenges that might be there. Thank you.
Thank you for this very rich intervention. 30 seconds for someone to take the floor, maybe, or is that too short? Any last thoughts? Okay. I think what I really take away is the need for more awareness raising to look at the multi-sectoral aspect of it, and we are really well placed as a CSN movement, definitely. And the resilience component is really important in upholding responsibilities. Oh, all right, will be moved into the plenary. Thank you.
Is being recorded.
Welcome back to the plenary. Shan, do we have a poll for this one? Yes, so let's take a little moment to for you to tell us what would you like the CSN Secretariat to prioritize in our support to CSAs in addressing food systems transformation. If you can choose a maximum of 3 options, that'd be super helpful. Please take a few seconds to do that before we move on. We're almost through. Great. All right, thank you so much. So we're almost done. Just before we move on to the questions, just wanted to maybe summarize the key takeaways from this presentation. So basically, the fact that food systems depend on a wide array of interdependent variables. So remember, it's a question of weaving all the perspectives together, but that's we need a change of mindset, and we need to recognize that food connects us all, and it connects us with nature, and that's so that we must change our mindset when it comes to food systems. And as a champion of the multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approach to improve nutrition, the CSN civil society network and the CSN movement as a whole has definitely a role to play in shaping the food systems agenda. So we'd very much like to provide more support in the future in this direction. And just leaving you with the quote of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that says that food systems hold the power to realize our shared vision for a better world And indeed, can you imagine if we had a food system that worked really well, that was resilient, sustainable? I mean, that would definitely have an amazing ripple effect on many other domains of our lives. So with this, let's just take a little bit of time to answer any questions, any burning questions that you may have. Please just unmute yourself and take the floor if you have any questions.
Hello. Yes, I'm Salman Muhammad from Wazobia International Children Foundation, Kano State of Nigeria. I just back. Honestly, hello.
Yes.
Yes, I really appreciate it, and I learned a lot on this your wonderful training, especially on sensibility. You know, as I see the way, even I learned a lot. Because I can because even in the communities, I know now, even we're supposed to show them the importance of the local available food and even the importance of sustainability in nutrition. I see in your trend, I hear that there is something on the homestead garden. I really learned a lot on that. I appreciate it, and please, I hope this your presentation you will send us to our mails, because we're supposed to step down to our members on our organization. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And yes, I do confirm that we will share the presentation afterwards with everyone, and also with everyone who hasn't been able to join. Unfortunately, the participation was capped at 100, and I know that many other people wanted to join. So we'll definitely see if there is an opportunity to either do another iteration of this training or send the presentation. Definitely, we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? I see that people have raised hands. I cannot see who, but please feel free to unmute and take the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, my name is Benjamin from Nigeria, from National Biotechnology Development Agency. I want to really appreciate this training, you guys, the platform, and the knowledge. What I want to speak about is that regenerative farming. It's something new now. Honestly, I really appreciate it, and also the relationship between the climate change, the effect on the food system, the nutrition and security. Thank you very much for that information. And I would like to add that what is SUN actually doing in the aspect of women empowerment? Because in my country here, women, they do most of the jobs. I mean, the farming, right, the cultivation, the end produce, the work at the end. So what is SUN doing in terms of women empowerment? Because if women can be empowered more in terms of training, their hygiene, and other aspects, I know it will contribute more positively to food security, the food system. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's a really important point here. And yeah, definitely, I think worldwide, the food is produced up to 80% by smallholder farmers, and women make up, I think, way more than half of those. And they often have less access to inputs, to banking services. So yeah, definitely women empowerment is a big issue. Luckily, this is one of the priorities of CSN. So we're really working on that generally speaking, always looking at ways to empower women in everything that we do and have a gender-sensitive approach to nutrition policy. But thanks for reminding this. It's really important. I see Alain has his hand raised as well. Do we have time for another question? Yes, 1 minute left, please.
Oui.
Oui.
OK, merci. En fait, je voulais d'abord vous remercier sur la qualité de votre exposé. Vraiment, nous avons beaucoup appris de cet exposé qui a été très enrichissant. Seulement, je voudrais savoir si le guide dont vous avez fait allusion ici sera traduit aussi en français, surtout que nous savons que les producteurs dans nos pays africains sont beaucoup plus analphabètes et qu'il faille bien qu'ils soient sensibilisés sur l'utilisation, ne fût-ce que le peu qu'ils produisent, pour essayer d'endiguer un peu la malnutrition, qu'elle soit liée à la malnutrition par excès que par carence. Surtout que dans nos pays, la plupart des produits importés, les gens affluent beaucoup plus sur les produits importés qui sont souvent de mauvaise qualité. Hein, c'est les fast-food, les produits, les OGM et autres, mais les produits naturels qui sont produits localement sont aussi mal utilisés. Or, ces guides peuvent nous aider à sensibiliser les communautés à mieux utiliser les produits locaux et attirer le maximum de profit sur ces produits. Aussi, je fais mienne un peu l'aspect genre, hein, surtout les femmes. Cette richesse est beaucoup plus produite par les femmes et ce serait quand même une très bonne occasion pour sensibiliser ces femmes sur l'utilisation des produits qu'ils produisent, des aliments qu'ils produisent et qu'ils préparent aussi pour donner aux familles. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Alain. Je suis ravie d'avoir une question en français. J'espère que nos amis francophones ont pu suivre aussi tous les débats. J'espère que la traduction marchait bien. Effectivement, je pense que vous voulez parler du guide du comité CFS, Committee on World Food Security. Et dans ce cas-là, oui, le guide est disponible en français. De toute façon, la politique du réseau de la société civile SUN est vraiment d'avoir tous les documents traduits au moins en français et en espagnol. Donc, la réponse est affirmative. Oui. Et merci pour aussi rappeler l'importance de la contribution des femmes dans la production alimentaire et l'importance de les sensibiliser au régime alimentaire sain et soutenable. Thank you very much. I think we're reaching the end of the training. Thank you so much for following it. And yeah, again, we'll be sharing the presentation and feel free to give us some feedback on it. We'll be sharing a feedback form afterwards. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Au revoir.
Thank you.
Merci.
Goodbye.